the Chinese Coast Guard actually put out a kind of pseudo map of what they'd done in the shape of a love heart around Taiwan. It was a pretty aggressive and strange thing to do. They have according to US intelligence, President Xi has decided that the PLA has to be ready to take Taiwan if necessary by 2027.
Okay, Richard. Well, let's start with what happened last week, which was China sending an aircraft carrier, more than 100 military jets into the waters off Taiwan. Ground troops, I believe, involved too. Did you look at that and think this is almost wargaming an invasion by China? And if not, what exactly did you determine that to be?
Well, it's both, isn't it? It's wargaming, and also it's a warning as well. There's no doubt that China is modernizing its military. That includes building aircraft carriers. 15 years ago, it didn't have any aircraft carriers. Now it's got three. As you mentioned, it's been trialing its latest aircraft carrier, which is its first actually domestically produced aircraft carrier. I mean, its other two are refitted or remodeled. This is an indigenously designed and produced one, the Liaoning. 2 weeks ago they had these big drills all the way around Taiwan. Rather sort of dramatic, actually. The Coast Guard, the Chinese Coast Guard, actually put out a kind of pseudo map of what they'd done in the shape of a love heart around Taiwan. It was a pretty aggressive and strange thing to do. They have according to US intelligence, President Xi has decided that the PLA has to be ready to take Taiwan if necessary by 2027. It's probably on course for that. It's a very technically difficult thing to take an army to take an island the size of Taiwan, even if you've got an army the size of China's. So this is the technical preparation. Now, whether they actually want to do that is another matter. But they have always said that if Taiwan declares formal independence, they will attack, and they need to be ready for that, I guess. So it's a real thing, real exercises to test its naval forces, and particularly how the airborne forces, the seaborne forces, and the ground troops will operate together, because that's what you need for an invasion of an island, obviously. The most important thing, though, is this deterrent effect. We have a new president in Taiwan this year. He's pro-independence, and what China says it's doing is warning him that if he declares independence, that's a red line.
Yeah, so this is President Lai, isn't it? How far has he gone in sort of trying to assert independence from China without actually declaring it?
Yeah, it's a very careful balancing act that both sides do, with America acting as a sort of intermediary, if you like, because America is Taiwan's backup, but America also is very concerned not to trigger a war in which it would be involved in the Pacific, and has regular chats with senior level, including sort of military chiefs, when relations are good with China, or at least okay. We've got this situation now in Taiwan. Go into the background a little. It's sometimes quite hard to explain unless you take into account the history. So the traditional, the rulers from the end of the Second World War in Taiwan until the 1990s was a party called the Kuomintang, which was a nationalist party. It was the Chinese Nationalist Party. It was the side that lost the Chinese Civil War. And when they lost the Civil War, their leaders and quite a lot of their supporters just flew to Taiwan, and that was going to be their last defense line. And the mainland, the Communist Party, never managed to invade Taiwan and take it. So in those days, for those years, they just were recognized as the alternative government of China. Since Taiwan became a democracy, there's been an ever greater call for just saying, well, this is now a separate country. Historically, the whether Taiwan was actually part of mainland China is contested. At times in its history it has been, at times in its history it wasn't. So there has been this independence movement saying, yeah, let's just declare independence. But of course, China says, well, if you do that, we'll invade, and no one wants that. So what you have now is succession of presidents who say, well, we're kind of pro-independence, but we're not going to declare independence. So they constantly assert their separateness from the mainland, which is China regards as threatening to its emotional claim over Taiwan, historic claim, as they would say, legal claim. It's certainly recognized as part of China by the United Nations. Um, but that balancing act goes on, and of course it's a kind of vicious circle for China, because the more it threatens, the less people in Taiwan like what they see in China, in the mainland of China, and the Communist Party. So the more the support for the independence side grows, and as time goes on as well, it grows. So that balancing act is quite a tricky tightrope that just extends out into the distance as far as we can see.
To sort of put a comparison on it, to the layman, is this effectively like a sort of Far Eastern version of Gaza? Is that sort of what we're talking about? The way you described it, it sounds a bit like that.
I kind of don't like international comparisons like this. I mean, it is in the sense that it's a flashpoint. I suppose if you're going to compare it to the Middle East, you might compare it to how America regards Iran. So America doesn't really like the Islamic Republic. Would like the Islamic Republic to be replaced as the government of Iran. Of course, before 1979, the government of Iran was pro-American and pro-Western. Um, every time Iran does something America doesn't like, there's, the American right starts, muttering about regime change and, attacking Iran to sort of cure the cancer of the Islamic Republic, as the right wing in America sees it. Well, a lot of people don't like the Islamic Republic. That, of course, just makes the Islamic Republic more anti-American, more aggressive, and there's no sign that America will actually try and achieve regime change in Iran. But just talking about it is inherently unstable, and that can go on forever. So I guess in that sense, there is a comparison there with the fact that the Communist Party in China would like the government in Taiwan to be replaced by a government that agreed to unification. But the more it, threatens to bring that about by force, the less the Taiwanese people want that.
Now, to bring us back to sort of the present day and the topic at hand, the US has recently approved a $2 billion agreement of arms sales to Taiwan. How significant is that, and what does it represent, both as far as America and Taiwan are concerned, and also then as far as China is concerned, and what has China's response been?
Well, in one sense, it's just more of the same. I mean, America is the main arms seller to Taiwan. Taiwan is a small island; it has 22 million people. It doesn't have the scale for an arms industry of the size of America's. And as everyone knows, there are a handful of major arms manufacturers around the world: America, Russia, obviously, also France, Britain, a couple of other places. China, obviously, supplying mainly itself. Um, Taiwan buys its weapons from America by and large, and always has done. A couple of interesting things about this. I mean, there's been an uptick under Biden. There's been a definite rearmament focus in Taiwan, partly because, as I say, the mainland itself has modernized its military quite considerably in the last 10, 15 years. And has been more threatening towards Taiwan, particularly under President Xi, who's a bit of a nationalist. Um, Quite interesting, this particular deal. It involves a missile system that by Raytheon, the big American arms manufacturer. Um, Most of this deal is three air defense systems that have been used in Ukraine, and that's another comparison. Really, is that is on everyone's mind, really, which is America is providing arms, both selling and giving arms to Ukraine to defend itself against Russia. And it's trying to send a message is that don't think about attacking Taiwan, because we will defend Taiwan in the same way that we've defended Ukraine against Russia. And America is definitely making that comparison between what Russia is doing in Ukraine and what China might do in Taiwan. So these multi-purpose defense systems, they can take out aircraft, they can take out drones, all sorts of airborne threats. They're much more modern than anything Taiwan currently has. That kind of sends its own message to China.
And China's response was to sort of step up patrols in the region, wasn't it? How so? And do you see that more as a message to Taiwan itself, or is it actually to America following this deal?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's a message to itself. I mean, so they did more of the same, really. What they do when they want to send a message is there's this median line, which is a kind of important fiction, if you like, the halfway point between the mainland and Taiwan across the Taiwan Strait, and they said, they regularly send planes over that median line to make a point, and that's what they've done in the last 36 hours. They've sent a whole series of jets and warships around Taiwan. They've just re-galvanized those exercises from a couple of weeks ago, just to make the point that we are watching, and these things don't go without a response. That's part of the sort of messaging that sort of both sides deploy. But of course, certainly when it comes to China versus Taiwan, China has a lot more firepower to show off.
And just finally, something that sort of struck me as you were talking about this, this potential time where a president may declare independence for Taiwan from China. Given what you mentioned about this, this build up to 2027 in China, where potentially they could go and reclaim it by force, isn't now, the earlier the better, the opportunity for someone, if it's ever going to happen, to declare independence for Taiwan, given that perhaps China isn't quite yet ready to do as it presumably at some point will?
Well, it's so much of geopolitics has over the last 20 or 30 years, particularly since the fall of the Berlin Wall, really has been choreographed. It's choreographed on the assumption that America is the sole superpower, and firstly that you don't want to cross America, and secondly that America doesn't want to get dragged needlessly into wars, particularly in Asia, where one thing that's often forgotten about Taiwan is what an important place, country, whatever we call it, island it is. The Taiwan has been, weirdly, given its, we read and write so much about the hostilities between Taiwan and China. Taiwan is also the key, along with Hong Kong, the key interlocutor for trade between the West and China. All those factories, not all of them, but a lot of those factories that we read about in China are actually owned by Taiwanese companies, and that's something that's often forgotten. So all your Apple Macs and laptops are made by a Taiwanese company. I mean, the design is by Apple, but the manufacturing is done by a Taiwanese company. Same with your Dells. All your laptops, phones are made in China and elsewhere by Taiwanese-owned companies. They do a lot of the tech. They do a lot of the R&D as well, the research and development. They make something like, I think it's 80% of the world's computer chips are actually made by Taiwanese companies, mostly in Taiwan. So any war is going to be devastating, not just for China and Taiwan and their neighbors, but depending on who gets involved, but for the whole system of world trade. So no one wants a war, and the strategic calculation that America has made. And the unspoken rule was, America will defend you, Taiwan, if you're attacked, but as long as you don't provoke it by declaring independence. As I say, that's been the case pretty much for the last, in Taiwan's case since the late 70s, when China and America opened up to each other, and the current sort of formulations were come up with. Things are now just much more uncertain. We have a much more aggressive form of world leadership. We have this nationalist populism that's going on. We have people like Trump who pride themselves on being unpredictable. We have President Putin, who's shown that you can challenge the um, you know, national borders if you want to, and long established arrangements, by arrangements since the Cold War, if you want to reclaim a bit of Ukraine for yourself or Georgia. And a much more powerful China and a much more aggressive leader in President Xi. So what people don't know is how much those old rules work anymore. That's the uncertainty. Um, the recent messaging from China, from President Xi, has been, we want those rules to stay in place. We want that to stay. And certainly President Biden is content with that. But whether that continues under President Xi and whether that continues with President Trump is another matter. And what the individual calculations of Taiwanese presence will be, rather depends on that. But it would be a foolish Taiwanese president, I think, who declared independence at this moment, because that would risk removing the American safety umbrella.